54 trained Japanese soldiers surrounded one wounded American in the dark. 7 minutes later, only one man was still standing. The island was small, barely a scar of volcanic rock in the Pacific. But in February 1945, it became one of the bloodiest pieces of ground in the Second World War. The Battle for Iwo Jima had already been raging for days. The beaches were layered with bodies. The air tasted like sulfur and cordite. Every inch of sand was measured in blood. The Japanese defenders were not retreating. They were burrowed deep inside the earth, inside a maze of tunnels, bunkers, and hidden firing ports that turned the island into a fortress. You could not see them. You only felt the bullets. Among the thousands of U.S. Marines fighting forward was a 20-year-old private from Kentucky. His name was Herschel Woody Williams. He was small, quiet, soft-spoken, not the kind of man you would pick out of a lineup and call a legend. But war does not choose legends by size. Williams was a flamethrower operator, one of the most dangerous jobs on the battlefield. To carry a flamethrower was to carry a target on your back. The tanks were heavy. The fuel was volatile. If hit, it could explode instantly. And yet, when the advance stalled under relentless Japanese machine gun fire, it was the flamethrower men who were called forward. On February 23rd, near the base of Mount Suribachi, a Marine company was pinned down by a network of reinforced concrete pillboxes. Every time they tried to move, automatic fire tore them apart. Men screamed, medics crawled, the ground shook from artillery. No one could get close enough to destroy the positions, so Williams stepped forward. There was no dramatic speech, no swelling music, just a nod. He advanced alone. Bullets cracked past him. Mortar rounds punched into the sand. The Japanese inside the bunkers waited, rifles trained on the approach. They had interlocking fields of fire. If one missed, the other would not. Williams reached the first pillbox by crawling through black volcanic sand that burned his hands. He hugged the ground, moved inch by inch. When he got close enough, he rose just long enough to fire a stream of liquid flame directly into the firing slit. The world turned orange. The fuel roared inside the bunker. The screams were immediate. Then, silence. One bunker down, but dozens remained. Instead of retreating, Williams reloaded and moved to the next position, still alone, still exposed. Covering Marines fired desperately from behind him, trying to suppress enemy gunners. But the Japanese were disciplined. They waited for him to rise, and every time he stood, he should have died. At the second pillbox, a burst of machine gun fire ripped past his head. He dove behind a shell crater. Shrapnel tore through the air. For a moment, the advance seemed impossible. Then he crawled again. He reached the rear of the bunker this time, found a ventilation opening, jammed the flamethrower nozzle inside, pulled the trigger. Another inferno. The heat was so intense it blistered paint off nearby equipment. The men inside had nowhere to run. The tunnel system trapped them as surely as it protected them. 2 bunkers destroyed. The Japanese defenders realized what was happening. They began targeting him specifically. Snipers adjusted their aim. Riflemen tracked his movements. At one point, a group of Japanese soldiers attempted a sudden rush from a concealed trench, hoping to overwhelm him at close range. He saw them at the last second. He swung the flamethrower and unleashed a curtain of fire across the trench line. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Men fell. Others stumbled back into the smoke. There was no pause, no time to process what he had done. He kept moving. For nearly 4 hours, Herschel Williams operated almost continuously in front of his company's lines, alone, advancing from bunker to bunker, sometimes covering more than 100 yards under direct fire, sometimes so close to the enemy he could hear them shouting inside their positions. Each approach was a gamble. Each ignition could have been his last. The flamethrower fuel would run dry. He would crawl back through incoming fire, swap tanks, and return forward again. At one bunker, Japanese soldiers attempted to ambush him from behind as he prepared to fire. 2 Marines spotted the movement and opened fire just in time. Williams turned and responded with flame. The attack collapsed. The count of destroyed pillboxes climbed. 5, 7, 9.
Entire strongpoints that had halted the Marine advance were being erased one by a single man crawling through ash and bullets. At one point, a Marine officer later reported that Japanese defenders made repeated attempts to concentrate their fire solely on Williams. It did not matter. He kept finding blind spots, dead angles, small folds in the terrain that let him inch closer. It felt, to those watching, almost impossible. By the time the action ended, he had destroyed a series of heavily fortified positions that had pinned down his unit and inflicted heavy casualties. The exact number of enemy killed in those minutes of direct engagement is impossible to know with precision. War does not keep perfect records inside burning concrete bunkers, but dozens of defenders were neutralized. The stronghold that seemed unbreakable was shattered. The Marine line finally moved forward. Mount Suribachi would fall that same day. The famous flag raising would be photographed hours later. The image would become one of the most iconic photographs in American history. But long before the camera clicked, there were men crawling alone through fire. Williams survived that day, burned, exhausted, nearly deaf from explosions, but alive. For his actions, he would receive the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. The citation described conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Those are official words. They do not capture the smell of burning concrete. They do not capture the fear. They do not capture what it means to advance alone toward 50 or more entrenched enemies who are determined to die rather than surrender. The Japanese doctrine on Iwo Jima was simple: fight to the last man. Many did. Few surrendered. For the Americans landing on that island, it meant every bunker had to be taken by force, every tunnel cleared by hand. Williams' actions did not end the battle. Thousands more would die before Iwo Jima was secured in March 1945. But in those hours on February 23rd, a single Marine changed the momentum for his unit. He broke a deadlock that had cost lives and could have cost many more. He never described himself as a hero. In interviews decades later, he spoke quietly about the men who did not come home, about friends lost on that black sand, about how he simply did his job. That may be the most unsettling part of all. History often compresses moments into dramatic lines. One man versus 54, 7 minutes, he killed them all. The reality is both more complex and more human. It was not rage that drove him forward, it was duty. It was the knowledge that if he did not move, the Marines behind him would remain trapped under machine gun fire. It was the understanding that every bunker left intact meant more Americans dead. War reduces choices to brutal simplicity: advance or watch others die. On that island of sulfur and smoke, Herschel Williams chose to advance. He carried a weapon that turned air into fire. He walked into fields of interlocking gunfire. He faced enemies who would not retreat, and he did not stop. When we look back at the battle for Iwo Jima, we often see the flag. But before the flag, there was flame. Before the photograph, there was a young Marine crawling alone through concrete fortresses filled with men waiting to kill him. 54 Japanese soldiers surrounded one wounded American in the dark. 7 minutes later, only one man was still standing.